Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to The Lead. I'm Cenk Tapper. We're going to begin with our politics lead today in the Trump administration, ramping up its efforts to turn the spotlight away from questions about itself and investigations into possible collusion with Russia or possible obstruction of justice and the firing of FBI Director James Comey, and to instead highlight matters pertaining to the previous president and the woman whom Mr. Trump defeated for the presidency, Hillary Clinton. President Trump today tweeting, quote, "It is now commonly agreed after many months of costly looking that there was no collusion between Russia and Trump. Was collusion with HC, Hillary Clinton." Couple points there. First, that, of course, is not commonly agreed. It's still being investigated. Second, the investigation is not just about Russia and Trump. It's also about the Trump team and people like Paul Manafort and Michael Flynn and Carter Page and on and on. But the White House has made it very clear they want all of you to look elsewhere.
There's still no evidence of collusion between the president and anyone. If any collusion took place, it would be between the DNC and the Clintons.
Sarah Sanders there, the White House press secretary, referring to lawyers for the Clinton campaign and the DNC hiring an opposition research firm to look into then-candidate Trump, an effort that resulted in the now infamous dossier of allegations involving President Trump and Russia. But the White House isn't stopping there. President Trump just took the unusual step of pushing the Justice Department to lift a gag order on an undercover FBI informant. The lawyer for that informant says that he wants to tell Congress about a bribery case involving Russians trying to gain influence in the American uranium industry during the Obama administration and efforts to seek favor with Bill and Hillary Clinton. It's an unusual move, perhaps even rife with conflicts of interest for any president to instruct the Justice Department to take any action having to do with a case that involves the president's political opponents, which is not to say that there are not legitimate questions the lawmakers might have about this issue. It's also fair to say, however, that as a political matter, the Trump administration and its allies would much rather talk about anything having to do with the Clintons than they would about special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into their own team's conduct. And the more extreme voices on the president's favorite channel have been talking quite a bit about this controversy, saying things like this.
If this had happened in the 1950s, there would be people up on treason charges right now. The Rosenbergs, okay? This is equivalent to what the Rosenbergs did, and those people got the chair. Think about it. Giving away nuclear capability to our enemies, that's what we're talking about.
It's not actually what we're talking about here on planet Earth, but whether the president was influenced by the cacophonous shrieks from the fever swamps or by congressional Republicans expressing reasonable frustrations that they could not conduct their oversight, Mr. Trump stepped in and intervened. CNN's Sarah Murray is at the White House for us. Sarah, how much of the action here is in the name of transparency, which frankly is not exactly one of President Trump's lodestars, and how much is him trying to muddy the waters so the American people get confused about all the charges and countercharges?
Well, Jake, of course, the White House is insisting this is all in the name of transparency and conducting a full and complete investigation. But the question still lingers about whether President Trump might be more inclined to talk about this, might be more inclined to have all of us be talking about this. So we're not talking about another investigation into Russia.
President Trump weighing in on a Justice Department investigation.
I think the uranium sale to Russia and the way it was done, so underhanded, with tremendous amounts of money being passed, I actually think that's Watergate modern age.
And raising questions about his interventionist approach to judicial matters. Sources tell CNN that Trump made it clear he wanted a gag order lifted so a key undercover informant in an FBI investigation could speak to Congress. The probe was looking into Russian efforts to gain influence in the uranium industry in the U.S. under the Obama administration. Trump's allies are coming to his defense, insisting the president was well within his rights.
It is not unusual for a president to weigh in. He believes, as many others do, frankly, that the FBI informant should be free to say what he knows. But this was made, let me repeat, the Judiciary Chairman in the United States Senate, Chuck Grassley, made this request to the Justice Department last week.
Grassley, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, sent a letter to the Justice Department last week asking the agency to lift the non-disclosure agreement that was preventing the informant from speaking to Congress. But Trump's comments on the uranium issue raise the question of whether he's truly looking for transparency or simply looking to draw attention away from other Russia-related matters, like investigations into potential collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia in 2016.
They made up the whole Russia hoax. Now it's turning out that the hoax is turned around, and you look at what's happened with Russia, and you look at the uranium deal, and you look at the fake dossier, so that's all turned around.
Trump's remarks in spite of the fact that even his top national security officials agree Russia tried to interfere in the U.S. election. Today, Trump once again denounced the Russia probes, tweeting, "It is now commonly agreed, after many months of costly looking, that there was no collusion between Russia and Trump, was collusion with HC." But there is no common consensus on whether collusion occurred. Neither GOP-controlled congressional committees nor the special counsel overseeing the Russia probe have reached a determination. The uranium issue is merely the president's latest foray into judicial matters. He has called on his attorney general, Jeff Sessions, to crack down on leaks.
I want the attorney general to be much tougher on the leaks from intelligence agencies, which are leaking like...
And of course, the president's most scrutinized act in judicial matters, firing FBI Director James Comey, well within the president's authority, but came with political backlash, including the naming of the special counsel leading that Russia probe. Jake.
Steve Bannon called it the biggest mistake in modern political history. Sarah Murray, thank you so much. Joining me now is David Urban. The president is going to head to Asia next week for this big trip. At this point, it's unclear if he's going to visit the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. I've been there. It's one of the spookiest places on the planet. Do you think he should go?
Look, Jake, it depends on security, right? If it's going to inflame the situation, perhaps not. I know that the president's trips overseas thus far have been wildly successful, even according to every media outlet. Even Jen would say that the president's trips so far have been successful. So I think it'll be a game time decision, and it'll be made then. I think what's important is to show our allies in the region that we stand behind them, that we're firmly behind our allies there, and that we remain the superpower and the largest power in the Asia-Pacific.
Bill, what do you think President Trump needs to accomplish on this trip?
I think he needs not to be seduced by President Xi of China, which he seems to have been already somewhat at Mar-a-Lago. The Chinese, I think, are playing him very well. You know, he came in as a big anti-China trade guy and talks tough on North Korea. But in fact, the Chinese made a couple of, I gather, token concessions on North Korea, and he's touting those as great victories now in terms of the North Korean economy. We'll see. He never says a word, obviously, about human rights in China or democracy or anything.
Or there being a currency manipulator.
Right. That seems to have gone away. What happened to that?
Right.
Yeah, and he has tweets congratulating President Xi on his, what was it, extraordinary elevation by the Communist Party Congress. Really, we're now, it's one thing to be polite and diplomatic. We're now congratulating dictators on their stooges, you know, elevating them. And Xi is a tough customer. So for me, that's the key. The key is, I agree with David, stick with our allies and don't get seduced by the president of China.
Let me just give Jen a chance. So President Trump's going to meet with President Xi. What more do you think can be done to encourage President Xi to do more to stop North Korea's nuclear proliferation, if anything?
Well, the Chinese don't do big, earth-shattering, surprising trips, hardly ever. It's all planned. They know exactly what they're going to say. They're going to read from their talking points. I'm sure Trump wants more than that. What has not changed and will make it harder for him is that the Chinese have different objectives as it relates to North Korea. They don't want the same thing the United States wants. Trump keeps pretending they do, and he needs to get over that. The third thing I'll say is, while Mattis said we want a diplomatic approach here, Trump has not indicated that. It needs to come from President Trump if there's going to be a real diplomatic process here. We saw that with Iran, with Obama. So that would need to happen, and there's a short window. So I would say that the importance of this trip is Trump indicating to the Chinese that he wants a diplomatic path forward here, and he wants their help in making that happen.
And don't you think with Abe and Japan going in the direction that we've urged the Japanese to go, taking more responsibilities, becoming a full partner, overcoming their World War II defense limitations, I think there Trump could do some good to help Abe, who just won a big victory, I think, in the parliamentary election.
Yeah, so just a couple quick points to Bill earlier. You know, there is a internal election in China. I'm not privy to the behind-the-scenes secrets of what's happening in the Chinese parliamentary system to put President Xi there, and whether or not the president should push harder or not harder. We need the Chinese to crack down and obviously be stronger with their sanctions against the North Koreans. And to Jen's point, we've had diplomacy for years and years and years. We've had talks. It has resulted in nothing. I mean, you get back to the table, these folks in North Korea are going to do exactly what they've done for the past 20 years. Nothing.
All right, we got to leave it there. Thank you so much, Jen.
We have actually great unity in the Republican Party. I called it a love fest. It was almost a love fest. Maybe it was a love fest.
A love fest.
Former White House strategist Steve Bannon told the Financial Times, quote, "The establishment Republicans are in full collapse. They're not even fighting back. They're out of ideas, guts, and out of money." And the PAC affiliated with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, they just attacked Bannon over domestic abuse charges and accusations by his ex-wife of saying something anti-Semitic. He denies both. Let's discuss this growing rift with Evan McMullen and Mindy Finn, Republicans who launched an independent presidential and vice presidential run against then-candidate Donald Trump. First of all, I want to just ask you about the news of the week. You have Bob Corker and Jeff Flake coming out very strongly criticizing the character of President Trump in a way that you two have been criticizing him for a long time, but to hear it from Republican senators, especially Corker, who supported him, was surprising. Do you think there will be more Senate Republicans, House Republicans who say similar things?
I think there will be, especially as time goes on, if the president and the Republican Party aren't able to advance, for example, comprehensive tax reform. Republicans are then, in Congress, Republicans are going to have to somehow explain why they haven't simply gotten more done, why the Republican Party hasn't been able to get more done with both chambers of Congress and the White House. And I think in that context, you may see them, for their own self-preservation, offering more critiques of the president. Now, we would like to see them speak truth now, to defend liberty and equality in America now, regardless of sort of where the legislative agenda is, because these things are important. And as Corker, McCain, and Flake and others have pointed out recently, our democracy is at stake.
I want you to take a look, Mindy, at this Twitter back and forth between Danny Tarkanian, who Bannon is pushing in Nevada to challenge incumbent Senator Dean Heller, a Republican. Tarkanian tweeted, quote, "I challenge Dean Heller to sign McConnell's replacement pledge. The Senate Leadership Fund," and that's the super PAC aligned with Mitch McConnell, they tweeted back, "Here's another pledge for Danny Tarkanian to sign, backing Bannon over his ex-wife's charges," which has a Daily News headline about allegations made against Bannon that he said something anti-Semitic. That is not a love fest. That is a nasty back and forth. And for McConnell's leadership PAC to basically go there and say, Bannon's anti-Semitic, or do you agree with that, Danny Tarkanian? That seems really, really gloves off.
Yeah, it is gloves off. It's remarkable. I mean, we have who was the president of the United States, the Republican president's chief strategist, waging war on the Senate Majority Leader. And we have Republican majorities everywhere. This is the moment to be unified. And here we are 9 months into the administration, and they're going to battle at each other. It's going to be an ugly 2018. I mean, I agree with one thing that Steve Bannon did say, which is that if the McConnell wing, or if the non-Bannon wing of Republicans, who represent a majority of actually the voters, they're going to have to fight if they want to have a chance in this. They can't be, what we have right now is two lanes, and I don't think this is going to work out well for the McConnell lane, which is we have those who are willing to worship Trump, and we have those who are pretending and faking that they worship Trump. What's going to win out? I would argue that if you're inauthentic about it, it's going to be exposed at some point, and you're going to look weak. They're going to have to be strong, and they're going to have to fight back.
That's interesting. When Jeff Flake announced that he was not running for re-election, Senator James Inhofe, Republican of Oklahoma, was asked about that, and he told the Associated Press, quote, "Maybe we do better by having some of the people who just don't like Trump leave and replace them with somebody else." That seems pretty remarkable and not particularly polite.
Well, more than that, it's just dumb. What are you going to do? How are you going to have a majority in the House or in the Senate without people like Flake? I mean, you see members of the House Republican Conference who are moderate Republicans now deciding they're not even going to run again. Well, those are your majority makers. So if you're interested in having a majority in either chamber, especially the House, well, then you depend on those people. And so if you alienate them and force them out and force a run in those districts or states between two non-incumbents, thereby giving Democrats an even greater advantage, that just seems like stupid politics to me. But more importantly than that, Jeff Flake was standing for fundamental American ideals, for truth. These are things that the Republican Party needs to stand for. The why of the purpose of the Republican Party needs to first and foremost be about defending the principles upon which this country was founded. If its purpose is not congruent, not compatible with that, as Flake argued it should be, then it is destined, I believe, to shrink in size and influence over time.
Mindy, I guess a question I might have, though, is President Trump's approval rating with Americans nationally is awful. It's under 40%. It has been for a long, long time. And it doesn't look like it's going to go up. But his approval rating with Republicans is really high. And the latest poll had him, a CNN poll, 82% of Republicans approving of what the president is doing. With all due respect and affection for you two, where's the evidence that the Republican voters are with your kind of Republicanism as opposed to President Trump's?
Yeah, well, Trump's approval rating is very high among Republicans because he's a Republican president. Republicans want to win. They're used to supporting that party label. They do see this opportunity of quote-unquote unified government, and they want to get some of the things passed that they support, like tax reform. They wanted to repeal Obamacare, some of these types of things. But if they're presented an alternative, I'm not convinced that the entire Republican voting base is behind Trump's populist nationalism, which is, of course, what Trump rode to the White House. A lot of polls that break down that Trump caucus show that there is a significant percentage that are free marketers. There's another percentage that are the younger, kind of enterprising type that care about inclusion. They want free enterprise, but an inclusive free enterprise that's not scapegoating Hispanics and African Americans and picking fights every day. So when presented with the alternative, when it becomes about ideas and philosophy, I think that that's when it starts to fall apart on Trump's side potentially, which is why this fight's important within the party.
Mindy Finn, Evan McMullen, thank you so much. Really appreciate your being here. Any moment we could get our first look at the super secret JFK files. What might they tell us about the assassination? That story's next. Politics lead in one of the closest connections yet between the Trump campaign and WikiLeaks during the campaign. We know now that the head of Cambridge Analytica, that's a research company contracted by the Trump campaign in 2016, that company reached out to WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange in summer 2016 to get access to thousands of Hillary Clinton's emails. Multiple sources tell CNN. Now, you can combine that with the fact that Trump confidant Roger Stone said that he had communications last year with Assange and with Guccifer 2.0, the hacker believed by the U.S. government to be affiliated with Russian intelligence. And you can combine that with Republican operative Peter Smith, who last year recruited cybersecurity experts to try to get in touch with hackers who we believed were Russian to try to obtain Clinton's emails. And also, one of those cybersecurity analysts told congressional investigators this month that Smith, who is no longer living, claimed at the time that he had connections to senior Trump campaign aides such as Michael Flynn. And you can combine all that with Russians reaching out to Donald Trump Jr. to offer to help the campaign, help that Trump Jr. eagerly accepted. And you can combine that with Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort reaching out to Putin friend and Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska and offering to provide briefings on the campaign, according to the Washington Post. You can take all of that, and what conclusion might you draw? Back with me is Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, who serves on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And Senator, I know you can't talk about classified information, but it seems like what we have here is Russians saying they want to help the campaign. This is all public source. Russians saying they want to help the campaign. Trump campaign operatives saying that they want to help. They want the help. They're interested. And a lot of folks on the edges of the Trump campaign seemingly trying to obtain these emails that came out on WikiLeaks and DC Leaks that President Trump talked about a whole lot during the campaign.
Well, Jake, it's a campaign. Let's go back to the whole premise of what we're dealing with. Campaigns. Campaigns understand that we're in a fight. They're going to take every advantage they can get. But every campaign knows, and we all know, you cannot take money from foreigners.
But can you take information from
them?
You
should not. If it's value, that's value. You'd pay for that. It's the same as taking a contribution. So we as a candidate know that. We're all briefed on this. Every campaign should know what the limits are, and they should all basically flatly turn it down. Any type of intrusion, offer to help, that's going to be in-kind services. You've got to report in-kind services.
And they didn't. So
everybody's guilty. But they're all going to do it if they can.
But I just laid out a lot of smoke.
You did. You laid out
a lot of smoke there.
A lot of smoke down right there.
You know a lot more than I do.
You did everything from what we call it's out there. It's all sourced. Okay, it's public information. There's an awful lot more going on, and there's a lot more investigations going on. We want to get to the bottom of this, and we come up with a report from the Senate Intelligence. It'll be a report that is credible, that's been gone through. It's not going to be political. It's going to be basically a group that we all sign on, Democrats and Republicans, that this report is found to be factual, and we all agree, whatever it may be. Mr. Mueller is going to do his own.
The separate FBI
investigation. And they're doing some things a little bit differently than what we're going to be doing in our committee. They're going a little different direction. So we just have to see what the end result is going to be. But it's it's long shot, not over.
Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California. He's on the House Armed Services Committee. He was briefed on the Niger ambush. Thanks so much for joining me, Congressman. Your colleagues on the House Armed Services Committee expressed concerns about ISIS gaining ground in Niger. What role, if any, do you think should the U.S. play there?
Well, I think the public has a lot of questions. I mean, in my town hall, most folks didn't even know that we have troops in Niger. And the question is, what is our strategic interest? Why is AQIM a threat to the United States? The president biannually submits a report to Congress, and currently we have combat troops in 17 countries, 13 countries where they're in harm's way. This needs to be debated in Congress, what the role should be we be there, and whether they have adequate support.
Why are U.S. troops in Niger? What do you tell the people at your town halls?
Well, the argument is that we're assisting the Nigerian government in helping go after AQIM. But the question we need to ask is, why is it always the United States? Couldn't the French do that? Do we have a objective of when we get out? Why is this not being debated in Congress? Again, the president submitted the report that almost 800 troops were there back in June, but we've had no discussion in Congress, and that we don't know if these troops are adequately have adequate safeguards. If there is such a situation like an ambush, do we have air cover? Do we have proper communication? So I think the big question and the big wake-up call for us is we have got combat troops in 17 countries around the world. We have our troops in harm's way in 13 countries around the world. And this interventionism may not be in our national interest, and certainly it ought to be debated in the United States Congress.
Do you think that the House should conduct an investigation into what happened during this ambush?
Absolutely. I was pleased. I think the military leaders were very transparent. I think they're going to conduct a full investigation. But I think the House also needs to conduct an investigation. And I think we have to understand that the problem isn't with our military. The problem is with the decisions of the American people and our elected officials. They're just following our orders, or the president's orders, but they're stretched thin. I mean, they're in 17 different countries. They often don't have sufficient equipment or sufficient cover. And what we really need to be asking is, should we be there? Should we be in 13 countries with harm's way? So yes, there needs to be an investigation into this incident, but I hope next time the president submits his annual report, biannual report in December, and we look at all the countries in the world where we have troops, that the Congress will have a debate and that the media will have a debate to inform Americans of where our troops are overseas.
And we should point out, just for fairness' sake, that a lot of these troops were sent to these countries in the previous administration under President Obama or the one before that, President Bush. I want to play a clip of one of your colleagues on the House Armed Services Committee from last night. Take a listen.
We're kept in the dark, and your report on the ground from Niger is in many ways much more detailed than we received this morning.
We're kept in the dark, he said. Are you getting, is the House Armed Services Committee getting the information you need from the Pentagon on this issue?
I think the military leaders are making a good faith effort. My sense was they were very forthcoming. They want to conduct a thorough investigation and rely on facts and not just speculate. Of course, CNN is extraordinary in reporting, and I'm sure that that's adding to the information we have. But my concern is not with the transparency of the military leaders or with their commitment to an investigation. My concern is, why are there members of Congress and senators who don't know that we have troops in Niger? I mean, this is because the report that details where we have troops, what their missions are, which are submitted to Congress on a biannual basis, gets no attention. It gets little media attention. It gets little congressional debate. And really, that's our first job as members of Congress, to be debating these issues of war and peace. And I hope Niger will be a wake-up call for all of us to do our duty and to see really what the mission is overseas and what our military needs and where we should be involved.
Congressman Scott Taylor, Republican of Virginia, said a few days ago on this program that these men and women put themselves in harm's way all over the world, but members of Congress, these are his words, not mine, don't even have the stones to debate it. Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you so much for having the stones and being here today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you for your coverage on this.
Are the Trump administration ramping up its efforts to turn the spotlight away from questions about itself and investigations into possible collusion with Russia or possible obstruction of justice and the firing of FBI Director James Comey, and to instead highlight matters pertaining to the previous president and the woman whom Mr. Trump defeated for the presidency, Hillary Clinton. President Trump today tweeting, quote, "It is now commonly agreed after many months of costly looking that there was no collusion between Russia and Trump. Was collusion with HC, Hillary Clinton." A couple points there. First, that, of course, is not commonly agreed. It's still being investigated. Second, the investigation is not just about Russia and Trump. It's also about the Trump team and people like Paul Manafort and Michael Flynn and Carter Page and on and on. But the White House has made it very clear they want all of you to look elsewhere.
There's still no evidence of collusion between the president and anyone. If any collusion took place, it would be between the DNC and the Clintons.
Sarah Sanders there, the White House press secretary, referring to lawyers for the Clinton campaign and the DNC hiring an opposition research firm to look into then-candidate Trump, an effort that resulted in the now infamous dossier of allegations involving President Trump and Russia. But the White House isn't stopping there. President Trump just took the unusual step of pushing the Justice Department to lift a gag order on an undercover FBI informant. The lawyer for that informant says that he wants to tell Congress about a bribery case involving Russians trying to gain influence in the American uranium industry during the Obama administration and efforts to seek favor with Bill and Hillary Clinton. It's an unusual move, perhaps even rife with conflicts of interest for any president to instruct the Justice Department to take any action having to do with a case that involves the president's political opponents, which is not to say that there are not legitimate questions the lawmakers might have about this issue. It's also fair to say, however, that as a political matter, the Trump administration and its allies would much rather talk about anything having to do with the Clintons than they would about special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into their own team's conduct. And the more extreme voices on the president's favorite channel have been talking quite a bit about this controversy, saying things like this.
If this had happened in the 1950s, there would be people up on treason charges right now. The Rosenbergs, okay? This is equivalent to what the Rosenbergs did, and those people got the chair. Think about it. Giving away nuclear capability to our enemies, that's what we're talking about.
It's not actually what we're talking about here on planet Earth, but whether the president was influenced by the cacophonous shrieks from the fever swamps or by congressional Republicans expressing reasonable frustrations that they could not conduct their oversight, Mr. Trump stepped in and intervened.
So we have a president-elect who uses Twitter. The good thing about Twitter is it offers him a way to communicate with voters in an intimate and immediate way. But there's also dangers that come with this tool, and there need to be some ground rules for how President-elect and President Trump can use Twitter. Don't tweet about foreign policy or foreign leaders. Twitter is not a great way to handle diplomacy. We've seen him get into some problems with this, including his tweets about China, which could create consequences that he's not fully anticipating. Don't offer knee-jerk reactions to terrorism. Unfortunately, there will be terrorism in the next few years, and it will be important that President Trump doesn't instantly go to Twitter and make provocative statements. Don't attack individual reporters or specific news organizations. It's very important that the press feels the freedom to cover this administration. Don't spread false accusations. One of the most stunning tweets came when President-elect Trump said that he actually won the popular vote and suggested that the 2.5 million votes that went to Hillary Clinton were somehow fraudulent.
Breaking news, CNN learning tonight that Hillary Clinton's campaign and the Democratic National Committee helped fund the research which led to the controversial and, frankly, salacious and disgusting in some of its allegations dossier that detailed alleged Russian efforts to help Donald Trump's presidential campaign. The Washington Post was first to report this. Out front, one of the reporters who just broke the story, Adam Entis with the Washington Post. Adam, good to have you back. So let's just start with the bottom line here. Clinton, the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC. What exactly did they do?
Well, I mean, they have a lawyer, and that lawyer went about looking to hire research firms. One of the firms that they hired was this company in Washington here called Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS, in turn, subcontracted out to Christopher Steele, the former British intelligence officer, to help get information about Trump's relationships in Russia. Those reports that Chris Steele produced were then passed back to the lawyer who was representing the Clinton campaign. What we don't really know is how that information was then relayed to the campaign. Our understanding from talking to people who are close to the matter is that those actual Steele reports were not directly handed to the campaign, so we don't really quite understand how the information was passed, who got the information, and we, obviously we want to know, what they did with that information after they received it.
Right, right, and those are crucial questions. Now, as to the dossier itself, I just want to remind our viewers, look, it's about 30 pages or something. It's obviously widely available out there. We don't talk about it because it hasn't been verified, but we have confirmed that some of the conversations as reported in this dossier between foreign nationals did occur. So some things in it appear to be true, others are completely uncorroborated at this time. What you're saying, Adam, is that it's unclear whether it was finished and packaged as we now can see it and handed to the Clinton campaign or not, right?
Well, I think the answer to that is it was not. These reports were being produced on a regular basis, every few weeks, every few months. He would prepare, Chris Steele would prepare a new report, which he would give to his the people who were paying him, Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS would then want to tell the lawyer for the Clinton campaign, who he's representing, what information was being collected. And that information was then being given to the campaign. The way that was being given is what we don't really understand. How high up in the campaign did that information go? We don't really know. But like you said, the point is that much of what Steele said, or at least some of what Steele said, is not that different from what the intelligence community later discloses in January, which was an effort by, alleging that the Russians were working to try to help Trump. That is one of the main findings of Steele's investigation. So even though, yes, we are revealing here that the Clinton campaign's money and the DNC's money was being used, at least in part, to fund this investigation by Chris Steele, that doesn't mean that what he produced was not accurate, was not inaccurate, or, some of the information was clearly accurate and is borne out by what the intelligence community later disclosed.
Right, which is obviously a crucial point. Now, when you say the money, do you have any idea how much money it was?
No, the people we talked to wouldn't tell us. They told us that the amount of money paid to Fusion GPS was shared between the campaign and the DNC. But we don't know what the dollar figures are, and we don't know exactly how that was broken down between the two organizations.
So, Adam, I want to, the point that you're making here, right? I mean, in whatever word you want to use for this, whether it was intelligence or opposition research, right? Whoever's paying for it, Christopher Steele, this former British intelligence agent, went out and got this information, some of which is true, some of which is uncorroborated. You're also reporting, though, that Fusion GPS, this firm that had been doing research on Trump, had already been doing research, opposition research on Trump during the Republican primaries. Yeah. Okay. Who was paying for that? Was it Ted Cruz?
No, we don't know. We're not sure who that Republican client was. When Fusion GPS was hired by that client, they did not know that Russia was going to be the main focus. At that point, they were hired. Trump was a relatively unknown in Washington. He wasn't disclosing his tax returns. He was, there really wasn't a lot of information out there about his business ties and frankly, his foreign relationships. So they were hired along with other firms to do some research. Initially, they were hired by a Republican client who remains secret. That has not been disclosed. In March of 2016, according to the law firm for the Clinton campaign, Fusion GPS approaches the lawyer representing the campaign and offers to basically have the Democrats continue funding the research that they were already doing on behalf of a Republican client.
Now, did they at that time, Adam, I want to bring in David Chang to this conversation, our political director, but at that time, did the Clinton campaign or the DNC say, we want this to focus on Russia? Or did that naturally happen?
based on the information I have, I have no evidence to support what you just said. I mean, I think, you know, I'm not exactly sure. I think Steele is brought on board. It becomes a subcontractor to Fusion GPS after the DNC and the Clinton campaign hire Fusion GPS through this lawyer. So it's not clear to me at what point Fusion GPS's investigation through Chris Steele focuses narrowly, most narrowly, on Russia. But keep in mind that Fusion GPS was investigating, outside of what Chris Steele was doing, a lot of other things related to Trump, and also providing that through the lawyer again to the Clinton campaign and to the DNC. So it wasn't just Russia-related material.
So, David Chalian, what's your reaction to this?
Well, it is not good news for the DNC and the Clinton campaign to be named and attached to the funding of something that you described in part has borne out and in part included a lot of uncorroborated stuff to date. That being said, we had previously reported, right, that this Oppo research process began on the Republican side, and then Democrats took over funding this opposition research operation. So who would those Democrats be if not the DNC and the Clinton campaign? Right. I think we would expect it to be them come the spring of 2016, the people funding opposition research. As you know, Aaron, Oppo research is a staple of presidential campaigns, of all kinds of campaigns. In fact, most candidates begin their campaigns by hiring such a firm to do it on themselves and find out all the potential holes that they may have, vulnerabilities that they may have, that an opponent may come at them with. But obviously, this particular document, as Adam was saying, because there is a significant portion of it that the U.S. intelligence communities and news organizations' reportings have proven true, it raises, obviously, big concerns. It is at the heart of the Mueller investigation, the Hill investigations, and having Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC attached for it is certainly going to give Trump supporters a talking point to try to simply add to the mix that this is political theater, and this will give them an opportunity to say that.